Welcome, everyone. My name is Caroline Colas, and I'm the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan, and the moderator and curator as of 2023 of the Positive Psychology Hour, a series that we do in partnership with the Whole Being Institute. Today on the Positive Psychology Hour, we are going to be talking about increase your stress resilience. This is part of the JCC's Books That Changed My Life Festival. And Phoebe Atkinson, who was the curator for, gosh, just years, Phoebe, was it like 3 years almost? She's going to be discussing psychologist Alyssa Appel's The Stress Prescription. It's an amazing book, and it recently came out, and how the findings in that book can help us mitigate stress and promote happiness. In her book, Dr. Appel highlights the SPIRE model, which many of us know about. That stands for spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional. It's a model of well-being that was designed by Tal Ben-Shahar, Megan McDonough, and Maria Serrois at the Whole Being Institute. And Tal talked about it a lot in his recent book. It's a really valuable tool for creating resilience, and Phoebe's going to talk about that, as well as many other micro practices that can help us not only mitigate stress, but anxiety as well. A little bit about Phoebe. In addition to being an LCSW, a licensed clinical social worker and a board certified coach and trainer and educator, practitioner in psychodrama, sociometry, and group psychotherapy. She's also on the core faculty of Whole Being Institute Positive Psychology Certificate Coaching Program, and has been a mentor and teaching assistant for WBI Certificate in Whole Being Positive Psychology. She recently joined Centenary University's master's program in happiness studies as a professor as well. Phoebe, welcome to the call.
Hi, thank you. It's so good to be here again. Welcome, everyone. And I so appreciate, Caroline, how, in passing the baton, you have created a wonderful sequence in your series of exemplars that have, some of them are on the call today. So thank you for including me in this roster. I was reading this book and finding this book, and I wrote to Caroline immediately after sending it out for Christmas presents to people, this is a book that we need to feature. So since this series is about books, I thought I'd bring this forward and really just present to you all her ideas. Dr. Appel is the scientist and the researcher, so I'm really just the messenger today, and I'm going to help us understand a bit more of her 7-day practices, as well as maybe interact with some of them. But I'll first start with a story. One of my mentors is Dr. Maria Serrois. She always says that, start with a story, and boy, do I have one about this topic. I was coming back from a trip down south last week, and I had got myself on the plane. I usually get extra seating just to manage my own stress. So I was up in the front row feeling all ready to go, and we taxied out onto the runway and all ready to go. I had my stress book. I was reading it. I had her on Audible. And the pilot comes on and says, well, they have a new protocol at LaGuardia. So it looks like we're going to be about 2 hours here before we can take off. And I just said, okay, it's one thing to read about stress and stress responses. Of course, we can't get rid of stress. This is what she starts the book by saying. We live in it, we swim in it. But how do we actually deal with it in the moment, when we have that spike? And Dr. Appel talks about the Buddhist practice of the first arrow and the second arrow. The first arrow is that things happen, difficult things happen. And then the second arrow is, what do we do? Do we make it worse, or can we make it better? So I turned to the woman next to me who had this really big package that she had brought on with her. And I asked her about it, and we got into a discussion, and I felt already I started to calibrate and downregulate my nervous system. And then about 10 minutes into it, the pilot came on again. Apparently they have 5 different clocks in the front of the plane, and he had read the clock wrong. He had read maybe it was a different time zone, but we were off within a half an hour. So I'm glad that I didn't have to sit on the runway forever, but boy, was it a fantastic experience for me to first of all, teach what you need to learn, and also that these are practices that in the moment that we can practice. And that's what I'm hoping today, is just to share with you those practices. Caroline, thank you for manning the noise and such. I also want to say that that these are different practices. Some of them are probably going to be very familiar to you because Dr. Eppel is very much influenced by positive psychology. You can hear it in the literature that she cites. And so her whole focus is on just helping people not to get rid of stress, we can't, but to manage it and to have in situ practices where we can actually engage with these responses as well as prepare for things. Like right now, I can feel my challenge stress right now. It's, I care about you all, I care about this material. So I'm aware of it in this moment. And it's a good thing. And that's what she also teaches us, that the story we tell about our stress responses really impact how we experience, how we function, and our well-being. So I'll put on the slides. I have quite a bit of them, and because I really wanted to introduce the material to you. However, you will get all these slides, and so we'll send those out after today when you get the recording. I first wanted to start with Kelly McGonigal because she started the month of February with us. Caroline, I know you are good friends with her. She is such a courageous, magnificent person and researcher. She was very brave. She gave a TED Talk in 2015, and she said, I was wrong about what I was teaching. She said, actually, everything I was teaching about stress was wrong. She went on to say that there's an upside of stress, basically, that it's good for us and that we can use it and we can become good at it. In these next few slides, I'm going to present to you a few of these researchers that have come before Dr. Eppel, because I want us to put in context the Positivity Hour and all the practitioners that we've been presenting so far, that what Dr. Eppel is presenting, some of it is new, but a lot of it is iterative science that she is bringing, also building on the shoulder of a lot of the stress researchers that have been studying stress for decades now. So in a nutshell, Kelly said that if we change the way we think about stress, it's going to impact how our body responds to it. This is a theme you're going to hear throughout today. She also shows that we have this stress hormone, oxytocin, that's released, especially with women. It's called the tend and befriend stress response, that the hormone oxytocin actually activates our response to move towards connection and to move towards each other. She also showed that when we help each other, which is certainly what we do on the Positivity Hour every week, we can help each other when we're under stress, and it creates resilience. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is creating stress resilience. And then also she talked about meaning in life. And certainly last week, Dr. Steger talked a lot about meaning and how central this is to our well-being, the search for meaning and what Kelly calls chasing meaning, really having a sense of moving towards purpose each day. So shout out to Kelly. I adore her, and I also did the moves. Caroline, I want you to know I watched the recording and I did all those joyful moves. Maybe we can do that today at day 4 when we get to talking about the physical body. So another shout out is to Dr. Karen Revich. She is the person from UPenn who worked with Martin Seligman creating the Soldier Fitness Program. Breathtaking book, The Resilience Factor. She cites the key findings of how we can actually promote that challenge response. And she shows that resilient people are optimistic, that they have, again, a mindset, which we're going to hear about, the beliefs that they can change things for the better. And that optimism and that word self-efficacy, which is about agency, that goes hand in hand. And the key to resilience, Dr. Revich says, is to have that realistic optimism. This isn't about happyology or toxic positivity. It's about grounded, realistic optimism, what we can control, and couple that with our sense of agency. So again, another foundation. This was happening already decades ago, this research. Another book is Dr. Rick Hanson. I know, Caroline, you've been featuring some people working with Hanson's positive neuroplasticity at the JCC. He's also a wonderful practitioner who really translates the science into application. And he recently had Dr. Eppel on his podcast. True resilience and well-being, they go hand in hand. So remember that as we're talking today, it's about our well-being. So when we think about stress resilience and well-being, they're actually interacting. And this is what Dr. Hansen has shown as well. And then I had to shout out to George Bonanno, his new book, The End of Trauma. He's up at Columbia, and he's actually been cited one of the top scientists in the world. He's actually a fantastic speaker and writer. This is his newest book. And he talks a lot about, we often think about that people have resilience somehow and it's out there, but he really emphasizes, and believe me, he researches the worst types of traumas, the most difficult things that people go through. And he said that it's actually in the moment, there are things that we can do, and then that builds confidence. So what he is showing in his new book is that we know a little bit about research of resilience, but we're still just in the beginning. But we know that we can cope with this, that we're built to cope, and that repeatedly people are able to cope and be resilient with just about any adversity. So I wanted to shout out George Bonanno, because he's absolutely someone you should know about, who's another person. We're standing on the shoulder of giants when we're talking about stress resilience. And then lastly, I just wanted to shout out to some of our practitioners that have been on the Positivity Hour. These are just a few. We started in the beginning of COVID with Dan Tomasulo. He brought learned hopefulness and the science of hope. Remember, and Caroline references this all the time, that hope is the only positive emotion that gets activated under threat. And he brought his beautiful model of learned hopefulness. We early on had Carolyn Miller, who said yes right away when we asked her to come on and speak about grit. We were anticipating with the beginning of COVID that we were going to need to really tap into grit, how to build it. And so she certainly delivered that. We had Fatima Doman, who is a beautiful researcher. She came from the Gallup organization, and her book and writing is about strengths and tapping into strengths. We had Mega Buttenheim, who has written the definitive book on embodied positive psychology. She worked with Tal Ben-Shahar for a long time, and also at the Whole Being Institute, and took all of the positive psychology research and translated it into embodied practices. And so we have Maria. She's been on quite a few times. She is our resident expert in resilience at the Whole Being Institute. And on it goes. We had Mom on Wheels, you know, someone who was a paraplegic dealing with being a parent, and how did she tap into her signature strengths? Dr. Kaufman and Jordan Feingold, Lisa Buxbaum, on, Megan, Barbara Fredrickson, Tal, and Ryan. So before we get into Dr. Eppel, I just wanted to have a context, because we are building in the Positivity Hour, not only on your resilience and what you bring collectively, but also the interaction of many, many of these exemplars. I wonder if we could ask you to first type into the chat before I introduce Dr. Eppel. What are some things that you've been doing during the Positivity Hour that have been useful for you, that you've been practicing to help you stay resilient during this pandemic and post-pandemic? So let's just learn from each other before I frame some of the science. Typing into the chat, what are some of the resilient strategies that you have been using? And then we'll see how those cross-reference to some of the stress prescription that Dr. Eppel suggests. So here we go. This is a treasure trove: self-care, bubble baths, walking, exercise and biking, staying connected, being more intentional with time, belly breathing, yes, yoga, practicing self-compassion, being in healthy Zoom activities, reading, listening to words, that intellectual engagement, slowing down, staying in good shape, volunteering at the food pantry. Hey, Caroline, this is just, I think everyone here is already an expert on stress resilience, don't you think? meditation,
Absolutely. Yeah.
riding the
Being in
waves.
nature, exercise and volunteering. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Being in nature. So everything that you've written here, I must say, is what is being covered over and over and over again. So you're living this already. And that's also what these researchers show, that we're built for resilience, and we're built to deal with trauma and stress. However, Dr. Eppel has a message that I want you to know, because with the last few years, we really show increases in a lot of the mental health issues and all the uncertainty that we're going to be talking about today. Okay, great. Clearing clutter. Yay. There you go. Okay, so now I'm going to be introducing Dr. Eppel, and I hope I'm saying her name right. If I'm not, I will, correct myself. That's what Michael said last week, that, identity is about taking in information, feedback, and incorporating it, right? So anyway, her book is brilliant. It's just a little pocket book. It's actually a series that have been provided by Penguin on prescriptions. They have one on relationships, and they have some other things. So it's a wonderful little book, and it's handy. It fits right in your bag. So her whole concept is really about wellness. She's a wellness practitioner, as is Kelly McGonigal, as is Caroline. But today there's a stronger sense of existential stress. It's new, and it's leading us to more and more uncertainty. And if you think about it, we have the pandemic, we have climate change, we have systemic racism that's really being amplified. We have increased rates of burnout, anxiety, and depression. That's what the researchers are showing. And we know that there are many triggers that can set off our stress response. There's really good triggers too. I have a family member that's, we're having a wedding this weekend, right? So there's good stressors, and it all sets off a stress response. And then you have, on a whole continuum of stress responses, you have war in Ukraine and all, the whole continuum. Dr. Eppel has shown, and I think Dr. Sherry Kelly would also emphasize this, that our thoughts are actually the most common form of our stress, because we can have a stressor and then we can ruminate it, and we go over it and over it and over it, because the body and the mind is trying to, with the worry, trying to figure things out. So this is something that we're going to be looking at in terms of how do you intervene. So within this context, Dr. Eppel urges prevention, and by bolstering well-being. And just like Dr. Rick Hansen has said, these well-being and stress responses, they go hand in hand. And emotional well-being is really her target, although we know it's the mind-body connection. Emotional well-being is how she describes that when we're feeling general and about our life and also our everyday experiences and how we reflect on that. That's called subjective well-being. She also studies how this emotional well-being interacts with stress. And it shows that our emotional well-being can buffer our stress responses, and it actually can be a resource that grows through adversity. So this whole concept of growing through adversity is very much what we think about too. Caroline, I'm hearing an open mic. So she makes this distinction between chronic and acute stress. And there's two different types of stress. We said that stress is really interwoven into our days. There are different results from these kinds of stress. So right now, one could say, I'm having acute stress, I'm presenting, and they've shown actually in research that, it can spike you because you care about things. Usually we're being stressed because we care about it. But if we get stressed too long, that is called chronic stress. Dr. Eppel's studies and research has been on caregivers. And much of her research that you're going to see in this book was the research around caregiving and how do they actually help people be more resilient in their caregiving in these kind of situations. Some other situations that can turn into chronic situations she cites are having a child perhaps with a chronic illness, having an ongoing conflict in a relationship, in a situation, having an addiction in the family. And one of her focuses in her work is with eating disorders and stress eating, having health problems that go on years and years and years. And what her message is that we need to find a new way of coping in order to experience these situations in a different way. And that's what her prescription is all about. So what her research team has created, which I absolutely adore, is this thing called the stress states. And it's actually a continuum where she is finding that we all have our certain baselines. And based on the research, our baselines are in higher stress than usual. So what we want to try to do is notice these different states, and I'm going to take you through them. And then the rest of the interventions really interact with how do we actually down-regulate from red into more of a green and a blue mind. So she talks about the red mind as one of the acute stress responses. So when we're having a stress response, you know, our body spikes to get us ready to move into action. This is actually what the stress response is there for. It's helping us focus and it's helping us mobilize. The yellow mind is about the kind of cognitive base load, the baseline cognitive load that we're carrying around with us. And what she's showing is that we have a lot more than we're aware of. We have a lot of unconscious stress that we're carrying around. Most of us, she said, have a lot more than we're aware of. And that's why in her first intervention, she works with that yellow quite a bit. The green mind is when we start to come down into rest. And what she's shown is in her research that we often think we're in rest mode, but we're not. We're multitasking. We have a lot of different screens going on, or a lot of different things, that information that we're trying to process. What her whole focus is that she wants to get us more into deep rest and blue mind. And if anyone read my blog that I wrote about this is when I pulled over. I was driving when I heard her on NPR, and I just had to pull off the road when she started talking about blue mind and deep restorative states, because she said that most of us live in the red and the yellow. And remember that Dr. Ippel is an aging research. She co-authored the book on the telomere effect, looking at how stress can impact our aging. So I really want you to hear the importance of her research about moving from red, yellow into green and blue, and that we can create these conditions to have more of the safety and all of the deep ease. And her book is called 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. So that's what we're getting at. We want to have our relationship to these daily stressors, and we want to actively cope in a way that we can have that stress response and then move our baseline back down to something that is more restorative. So this is her stress prescription that I'm going to take you through today. And Caroline, I can't see the chat. So if there's anything in particular, please just stop me and I'll come off the slides. So this is the overview, and then we'll go through each one. These are short practices that we can do every day. And she calls them top down and bottom up. Top down are kind of the cognitive, the frames, the mindsets, and then the bottom up is the interventions that we have with our body. And you can impact through either top down or bottom up. We don't need to do all of these. These, again, are our toolkit. In fact, in her book, she has the little toolkit at the end of each chapter. And she talks about in crisis, we have a go bag. So each tool you put in your go bag. Whatever fits your lifestyle, there's a kind of phrase around stress researchers. They say, what works? Well, whatever you will do is the thing that works. But we can tune up our nervous system. We can't control events, but we can control and change how we respond. And that's her message. So the first week or the first day is something she calls catch and release. And basically, this is about tuning in to this unconscious stress that we're carrying around all the time, that we want to build uncertainty tolerance, she talks about. So I'm going to take us into a quick exercise that we can do. And if it feels comfortable, I'm just going to ask you to sit back in your chair and get comfortable. And we're going to do one of these micro practices, and then you can practice that on your own. Hopefully you'll have a reference if we do it in person. So I'm going to have you, if it feels comfortable, to close your eyes for a moment and let yourself just land in your seat, feeling your feet on the floor, and your sits bones. You can even rock from side to side, right to left. It's called the sits bones rock. You just slowly, it starts to actually move your spine a bit. And then I'd like you to just tune in and ask yourself in this moment, is there something that you have that you're aware of that you're holding that feels uncertain? And as you notice this, this is about bringing it up to consciousness that then you can, in this moment, choose to release it. This is a present moment focused practice. So being able to just scan the body, and if you notice any stress or tension, I know when I'm with Caroline, I often will start just micro moving, as you notice she does. So just releasing anything that you might be aware of right now, just as you focus on your breathing. And I invite you to open to the receptivity of this moment. We have a half an hour together. So just in this moment, bringing your focus to your breathing, welcoming a warm feeling of just open receptivity to this moment. And tapping into this present moment, I'm going to also invite you to turn up your curiosity, that openness to experience what will happen as you just tune that curiosity up a little bit. And coming back into the ease of this moment, and then slowly opening your eyes and looking around in your space, maybe to the right, and just seeing something and asking yourself, what is it that you see? Looking around your room to the left. I'm looking out. We had 4 inches of snow last night, and I'm looking out at this beautiful fir tree leaf, the fir and covered with snow. Okay, so coming on back. So looking at each other, if you want to put yourself on gallery for a minute and just say hi and notice that was just about a 30-second, 1-minute practice. And what this practice is called catch and release. Catch and release. I can imagine what Caroline would do with that with her Nia, right? Catch it and then release it. It's not that these things are not happening, right? But in the moment, because we have so much cognitive overload of our stress, she wants us to help us really see in these moments we can keep downloading. We can keep tracking for this unconscious cognitive load that we're worrying all the time and bring us back to the present moment. What she studied is researchers. Remember, she has studied caregivers and people in all kinds of stress situations. These are the interventions that have shown that when people engage in, they actually have a better stress response in their stress index. They have all kinds of measurements in her practice. So this is about evaluating who manages their stress better. So the first practice is what she calls building uncertainty tolerance, being able to in the moment, find the freedom of in this moment, there's no tiger in the room. I can come back to present moment practice. And these are actually mindfulness practices that she's introducing right up front that we can tap into the present moment. You'll see in the slides that I have and that I'll share with you that it's from her book. She actually takes us through these experiences that you set a chime or a bell timer on your phone. And she says, please make it a nice one so you don't startle yourself. And then when the timer goes off, just check in with your body, do a body scan, tune in and ask, what are you uncertain about? And then when you are aware of it, you can release it when you connect with that and then just release. Again, when you can name something, you can release it. So that's about tuning in to your body. And over time, there is a practice that starts to become habitual. The whole book is about building new habits, new stress habits. The second is a very powerful one. You might know it for those of you who are familiar with 12-step recovery, because it's really about the serenity prayer, what I can change and what I can't change. So the second one is about evaluating and prioritizing. And she quotes Annie Dillard in that wonderful quote, "How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. What we do with this hour or that one is what we are doing." So really to focus on her second day is to take a stress inventory. If we're looking at these conditions that create stress, we can actually choose to simplify or to align more with our values and purpose and put down some of the things that we cannot control. So in the stress research that she's shown, one of the things that people have definitely demonstrated during COVID is to look at what's most important. And what she has found is that people have simplified, and also they have aligned with their sense of purpose. And she says living a life that has meaning and purpose, going back to Dr. Steger last week, is one of the greatest ways to buffer stress. The eudaimonic kind of happiness, having a sense of what gets you up in the morning. So she actually has people think about that, and she talks about having a sense of urgency about it, because these days, and I see Jody Wellman is on our call today, Jody's whole message is wake up. We have this urgency, this sense of kind of spiritual urgency. Certainly COVID provided that what's really important. And she also looked at in her research the concept of radical acceptance with the caregivers and some of the people that they were working with, that acceptance was the piece that actually led to stress resilience. What can I accept about this? And then I can start to say, how am I going to accept all the feelings that are connecting to it? And then I can start to move on, because I can't change what's happened, but I can change how I'm responding and how I'm coping. So again, this is a distillation of a whole bunch of research in her chapter, but the whole idea is evaluate, prioritize, as Jody would say, remember, that these moments and these days are our choice, and that we can use our choices to buffer our stress in terms of how we're going to create our daily routines. Dr. Eppel also talks about that our routines are additive, and that we can tweak, we can look at how we're spending our days and our moments and how we're scheduling our choices, and then continuing to align with things that are most important to us. And a sense of purpose is something we're going to come back to at day 7. So again, the stress inventory, looking at the things that are stressful, and then really starting to do an inventory to prioritize what can I change, what can't I change, and can I deploy that radical acceptance, which is talked a lot about with Tara Brach and a lot of the mindfulness practitioners. You'll see this theme of mindfulness, of coming back into the moment and of choosing. The third day is, again, part of the top-down interventions that she's proposed. This is about a stress mindset, and it's super important because how we shape our experience, again, the story we tell, the mindset, the belief we have about stress is really going to shape how we experience it. She talks about in the beginning to create a personal prescription, which is a stress shield. If you have something that you're preparing, for instance, a talk or something that's going to be difficult, you do the pre-work to help you gather information and then to put in place some of the things that are going to be resources for you. She combines that with the self-talk, and she calls all of this mounting a challenge response to stress. There is a threat response to stress, that we can be in that survival mode, or we can actually reframe that into a challenge response where we're activating and we're saying to ourselves, for instance, my stress response is an asset. It helps me rise to the challenge. Like today, rising to the challenge because I care so much about you, about this material, and being able to provide in a nutshell, some of this wonderful research. So maybe I'll spark some curiosity and you can further investigate her work. I can recover quickly from stress. My body was built to it. Going back to George Bonanno, we are built for stress. We are built to have a stress, an acute stress response, and then recover. That's called a healthy stress response. And again, what she's saying is we need to practice this and to say to ourselves, this is helping me rise to the challenge in the moment. My body was built, it's helping me, and I can recover quickly. And then a few other cognitions is I can only do my best. Everything else is out of my control, kind of going back to day 2. And then the other one is about the self-efficacy. I have what it takes to figure this out. I can also ask for help. We know from George Bonanno's work is that confidence builds when we engage with adversity. It's not out there. It's not something that we're going to figure out. We can only figure out by doing it, and then to take that information and sort through what worked and then use that as our toolkit going forward. And we can always ask for help, which, Caroline, is why we built this program in the beginning. So day 3 always has a second, each day has a second or third practice. I'm only highlighting one from each, but for day 3, I wanted to highlight a second one that we could actually interact with. Values affirmation activates the reward center in the brain. And what Dr. Eppel says is when we are looking at shaping our day and also how we're framing our stress response, we want to ground ourselves in the knowledge that we're multifaceted in terms of our identity. And that's a part of our stress resilience. And we have many different values and aspects of our lives. And she says with a solid foundation of where our value and worth really comes from, we're much more able to mount that challenge response and then recover more easily. So I'm going to have you do a quick exercise that she has you do in the book. If you have a paper handy, that's great, or else you can do it as a thought experiment. Look at this values list. You know, values assessments are something that coaches do all the time with their clients, and hopefully it's something that you think about. And choose 3 of the values that are on this list, if you can see, for those of you who are here in person and also in watching the recording. There's quite a few of these values. So her suggestion is to take 3 values in your life right now and just write down the value, and then right next to it, how are you honoring that? What's an example of how you're living that value? So I'll just give you a minute. I'll be silent and take a moment and look at maybe these 3 that stand out. There might be many, but just for this exercise to look at, again, alignment with the values and how they help you to then move towards what's important in your life and make some of those choices. We can do hard things when we know why we're doing them and what they're connected to. You can also take a picture of this. You will get the slides, but if it's easier, you can take a screenshot.
And Phoebe, we also had a question from the chat about any tips on how to get acceptance. And my understanding is that self-acceptance is the primary importance there, and that can be accessed. I was thinking of Kristen Neff's work of self-compassion. And does Dr. Appel
So,
say anything?
yeah,
about
so
that?
she's not certainly self-compassion is something she talks about. This is more of a radical acceptance, is the fact that, you know, tough things happen. The diagnosis happened. This loss happened. This thing in my life has happened. So it's not self-acceptance so much as acceptance of the situation, or I did this thing, right? And I have, so the radical acceptance is about accepting that a reality has happened versus avoiding. That's a coping mechanism. And then accepting all the feelings that come with it. We first have to be able to be with that. And then to, it's iterative, because we're going to go in and out of, depending on the stress, the trauma, the experience, we're going to have all kinds of feelings. So radical acceptance is iterative. It's not a one and done, as Megan McDonough would say. However, the values affirmation are self-affirmations. These are, really affirming, these are the things that are important to me. So that's the distinction.
And Stephanie mentioned that she noticed that exercise and physical wellness isn't on the core value
Oh,
list.
oh yes, but it is coming in the next day or two. So you can add that as well. And where would you add that? You could just add that right to the list. So, so I just want to do a quick check-in with you. I'm going to go off the screen, and because time is moving along. So writing into the chat, if you will, what is one thing that you discovered in that 1 or 2 minute process around that values alignment? When you think about how you're living some of those values, what did you learn? She says that this is one of the important aspects of being stress resilient, which is what this prescription is about, aligning with what's important to you, and then shaping those days, as we had read before, around what's important, how am I living it? Because it helps us to do a hard thing.
Nicole says, I'm doing it.
Yay, with a smile, Nicole. And this is what Dr. Bonanno shows, is that when we're doing it, it actually gives the reward center of the brain, right? It says, hello, you're aligning. This is you. This is your identity. So it's a virtuous cycle that as we get to know our values and aligning with that, I think Jody would be very happy, because Jody, your work seems to be all about helping people to distinguish what's important and really making those choices, however tough they are. The courage that comes.
Yeah. Stephanie says professional and personal classes are a constant feature in my life. Deb, it's making it easier for me to do stuff when I start self-doubting. Jody says it felt good to pat myself on the back for the values I'm living. And I was also judging myself for the values I've been compromising, leaving in the dust.
Yes.
Eva says how important relationships are to me and how I am prioritizing them. These are great, everyone.
Yes,
Jennifer
wonderful.
says, I love her message about many parts of our being. I'm not one thing. I am what is important to me. And Catherine says, keeping my word to myself for my own self-care. And Abby, of course, that despite a terminal prognosis, I'm living a number of my values every day. Also reminded me of others that I would like to integrate more fully.
Yes, wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to say, wow, that was a 1 minute exercise. So I want you to, keep working with this. And I want to say, Jody, I know you presented last year on regret, or was it this year? So as you're having those regrets, you can, turn those regrets into some action. And also Jody wrote a fabulous blog on multiple selves and possible selves for those who want to learn more about multiplicity, that we look at all these possibilities, and really, really appreciate everything, just the breathtaking authenticity. People, thank you for jumping in with this exercise. I want to, bring some of this home to some interaction. Okay, so when we have that values affirmation, it activates the reward center. It reinforces I'm on the right track. This next one is about metabolizing body stress. This is more of the bottom up that she talks about. This is about stress fitness. It means exercising the body with short bursts of stress several times a week. One of the most research right now is the HIIT. And I was working out with Caroline all during the pandemic, and I discovered what HIIT was. It's that high intensity training where you just have short bursts and then you take a rest. There's also brisk walking. She's also done a lot of work with Wim Hof, he's the Iceman. They do the cold and the hot. And sometimes I'll do a little cold at the end of my shower. I'll put my toe in or something. I feel very brave. So she talks about these shots of healthy stress, that we want to find our edge, because actually stress is good for us when it's in these small doses, and it can build over time our ability to be more resilient. Physical resilience comes emotional resilience. They go hand in hand. And what she's learning is that through the research, you can relax into the discomfort and you can build your strength. Now, if you can't do that, then she just says, do some gentle yoga or do some, some walking, do what you can. And what we know is whenever we're doing these body practices, we want to build in accountability. And then our body really loves this. She says these short bursts of stress, when you're just right at the edge and you move into the discomfort, maybe in the moment it doesn't feel so good, but then afterwards there's all kinds of chemicals that are released. And so you can focus on the moment, but also afterwards you get those benefits. And I'm sure, Caroline, you could speak a lot as the director of wellness about the benefits of it in her chapter on this. She goes into it. One of the other parts of this is metabolizing the body stress. So at the end of the day or during the day, make sure that you're moving, because if we have that yellow zone going on or that red zone, if we don't get up and move or we find a way, again, these are all proactive. Chris Peterson said that positive psychology is not a spectator sport. This is not spectator. We have to be proactive in whatever you can do to help metabolize that body stress. Caroline, I just want to pause for a minute. You're smiling. Is there something that is coming up for you as you hear this,
Yes,
as the director of wellness?
Yeah. I love that she uses the word metabolize.
Mm-hmm,
and I think that that's an important distinction to make, that when we move, we are actually digesting stress.
Yes.
And
yes.
we're metabolizing it, and that it can stick with us, and sort of think of being very full after a meal like Thanksgiving or something like that. Our stress, what I feel like her book is saying is that our stress menu has just increased.
Yes.
And we need ways to chew it and digest it.
Exactly.
And exercise or moving.
Yes.
So
exactly. So you and I said this could be a 6-week or 7-week series. So let's do it. In the meantime, type into the chat something that you do to metabolize your body stress. How do you have a shot of healthy stress? How do you move your body in terms of the, that physical resilience and that interaction with emotional resilience? What are some things that you do that, again, you can just claim and we can all read and benefit from that? Yeah, strength training makes me feel like I can conquer the world, right? So the research shows that as you get stronger, it actually increases your self-efficacy, Rachel. So, and love the NIA classes, right? NIA to me is start anywhere. You can just start anywhere with NIA, and it's a full joy, full body joy. Jody, deep breaths, right? And exhaling. And Caroline's going to take us into extended some breathing in a minute that has to go with day 6. We're still on day 4. Zumba, fantastic. Yeah, running with sprints. Yes, right. That hit, that high intensity, and then resting. Dancing to the Doobie Brothers, fantastic. That I think of the joy of movement and Kelly McGonigal's work. Bring in the music and the rhythm. Amy, it helps to decrease my stress getting out riding my bike. Yes, you're going to get into nature, and that's actually day 5, I think, which we're coming up against. So that nature immersion. So keep it going. I'm going to bring us into the next few days so we can finish this. So the next one is about immersion in nature. And Dr. Keltner has a new book on awe. We're going to be presenting this in March, Caroline, you and Megan and I, especially interpersonal awe. But the whole idea is that awe can be an ace in our pocket, that Dr. Eppel said that we are resilient. Our bodies, our cells, our spirits are built for resilience. And awe is an ace we have in our pocket. It can cut through hard moments and strengthen inner resilience. So the research now is off the charts around nature and how we can recalibrate our nervous system, even if you're living in urban settings, no matter what. So you want to get into the blue mind now. These are the deep restorative states. And so you can be out in wild nature. You can also be in urban nature, in urban settings. And you can also create in your home a sanctuary where you can deactivate the brain that fuels those stress networks, the rumination, the negative self-related mind wandering. You can actually create a home sanctuary where you're conditioning your mind to go into a place of rest. And so this is the immersing yourself in nature, sensory absorption, using some smells, and all of that is everything that she's shown in her research, that we want to get into those deep restorative states. Nature is an easy way to access that. You can also have pictures, or you can have a sanctuary in your home. When you go into that area, your body doesn't even have to be conscious of it. You're going to start to prime yourself for those states. So that's the 5th day. And then the 6th day is a deep rest through breath. And I've asked Caroline before we end and get to day 7, to Caroline, maybe 2 minutes of a breath focus for us. So she talks about getting us into the breath, using that amazing breath for restoration to breathe into our body.
Yes, of course. Right when you asked me to do that, my computer decided to do something fun, which was disappear everybody. So first, the most important thing to know about breathing is that we want to relax as we do it, meaning we just want to breathe deeply, right? Usually we can go into deep breathing with our deep kind of diaphragmatic belly breathing, and that will slow us down. Maria Serwa says even 3 deep breaths changes the brain. And it's really true. So breathe through your nose with your mouth closed and breathe as easily and comfortably using sort of a light, slow, deep method. Make it soft, make it gentle, make it quiet. Slow it down as much as you can and get it to be as deep as you can in this moment. And that'll be different for everyone. So go ahead and take a minute to just do that. Sometimes I like to close my eyes. Sometimes I like to put my hands together as Mega, our joyologist and amazing Let Your Yoga Dance practitioner who's been on the Positive Psychology Hour 19 times, will often say, where I bring my one hand, which can represent the past, and my other hand, which represents the future, and just bring them together so that I'm in this present moment breathing. And sometimes that touch helps me slow down. And this is really about training your nervous system to calm down, right? And each of us has such a unique nervous system. Some people like to hold onto their arms as they breathe. Some people like to just press on their chest as they breathe to feel it. This just kind of amplifies the efficacy of the breath when we add another sense to it. Now, let's do something where we really take off the backpack and we go into a specific breathing technique for the next few minutes. It's a regulated breath where you breathe in for 4 seconds through the nose, and then you hold it for 6, and then you breathe out very slowly for 8. If this is too stressful, then shorten it a little bit, but give it a try. And here's what I'd like to do. I like to just kind of touch my fingers so I remember where I am in the counting. So if that's helpful for you, you can do that with me. So we're going to go in for 4, and I touch my fingers, hold for 6, and then out for 8. Let's do that again. And one more time, in and out. Repeating this pattern, imagine your breath radiating throughout your whole body to the tips of your fingers and the ends of your toes. This only takes a few minutes, but even a few minutes of this deep relaxation breathing profoundly affects our nervous system. And I think of it as kind of a reset. And what I'd love you to, why it makes sense is right, our nose, our mouth, it's right connected to our brain. The cranial nerves are right there. So when we breathe, it's one of the fastest ways that we can access that sense of calm. Phoebe, back to you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So that was day 6, moving our breath to change our body and our mind, that bottom up, and breathing in deeply to bring your mind home to your body. As Thich Nhat Hanh says in her book, she talks about the extended exhale, which Caroline showed us. That's the quickest way to reset our nervous system. And then here's day 7, and this is really where the tie-in is to Spire in my mind. And you think about the broaden and build theory, that in her research with caregivers and all kinds of other people, they're showing that how we wake up and how we end the day, here's the research on gratitude, it matters. So they had people and they checked in with them throughout the day, waking up feeling with a sense of purpose. What am I looking forward to? Just even a minute or two. What am I grateful for? To activate those positive neurochemicals that act, if you think about the hedonic adaptation, it just really makes us in the here and now, looking forward to getting all of that cascade of neurochemicals going. And then at the end of the day, what am I grateful for? Was there something that happened that went better than I expected? And also what made me smile or feel good? And everyday practices, moments of contentment, joy, appreciation. She also features positive social connection. So that day of beginning and ending, she calls it creating these these bliss bookends, and starting the day full and ending it full. So that's another tie-in to Spire. And how I saw that with Spire was when I read this, and then she actually mentioned Spire in her chapter on day 7, is that we can intentionally place ourselves into these Spire experiences, building the infrastructure of long-term happiness practices into our future. So she's emphasized the importance of presence in day 1, the mindfulness of taking off the stress and just being in the here and now in a very proactive way as part of the prescription, having a sense of purpose and meaning, really being able to look at towards what you're working and with a sense of values and purpose, and also savoring the present moment, that Spire, the S, and then all those bottom up practices today, the HIT, the breathing, all of that mind body practice, the mindsets, the values, how we think about stress, the kinds of framing and reframing that we can do, that our body is actually revving up for it to help us concentrate or to get ready for, to engage in this thing that's so important. The values alignment that goes with the intellectual and really being open to learning, the positive social connections, including with yourself and then others, being able to really build those and cultivate those, and then the sense of emotional contagion, all of those micro moments of positivity that we can be proactive around. So these are the tie-ins in my mind to Spire. And speaking of joy, I just wanted you to know that a while back, the JCC hosted Mission Joy, the movie. She's actually been tapped by the producers of that movie to do a wellness study. And you can go on the missionjoy.org website and be a part of it. It's free. It's her Joy Project. And her whole book is about more ease and more joy. The research shows that when it comes to building stress resilience, one of the most important, powerful interventions is focusing on joy, especially those positive things that exist now in our lives and also in creating a positive future. So in the slideshow, I have also included her overall prescription and a summary of her work, and you'll get that when you have the slides. I want to say that Dr. Ippel reminds us that we need to renew our prescription over and over and over again, that these are practices, they are not one and done. But when we have mindfulness practices or any of these things, they are really iterative and incremental. And so if we practice them, sometimes we don't feel it right away, like the breath practice, but over time, we're going to start to reset our baseline. And that is her message, that she wants us to come out of red and yellow, be more aware of how much we are in yellow with all the uncertainty. And the last thing I'll say is she's moved from this wellness into climate action. She's looking at now, instead of being overwhelmed in so much despair, how do we use the stress research to create challenge responses to climate action instead of climate change? So she is really now focused on collective efforts and really this whole idea of contagious hope and working with this resilience and stress resilience mindset to help us deal with these big challenges, which is where we started, Caroline. I'd like to end with saying thank you for meeting the challenge when we started in COVID and we looked at each other and said, what should we do here? And to say we've created together with all of you this collective resource, this kind of go bag that we can always turn to tap into our resources.
Yeah, and I just have to thank you, Phoebe. I mean, clearly, once again, such a joy to work with you. Once again, the comprehensive nature of this presentation, right, everyone? We have a book list that is phenomenal, in addition to all kinds of practices, in addition to just a plethora of what we can do to stay in the blue. Right, the green and blue, everyone, and just so grateful to you
Yeah.
for your love of learning and your comprehensive delving into a topic and then finding it, taking to Main Street, finding a way to share it with all of us. That's so practical, right, everyone? It's just
Yes.
really a treat to
Yes.
spend time
And
with you and to have you on the Positive Psychology Hour and
thank
to
you.
partner with you.
And thank you. And the book lists were those pictures of books, and you'll get the slides. We'll send them out. So maybe just typing in one thing that you're taking, and then I know you're going to tee us up for next week, Caroline. So typing into the chat something that might have stood out for you or that sparked an interest, and keep practicing with these. Hopefully it was just a taster for you to look at your own stress prescription and how do you use the science to be more powerful in your choices around
The power of breath. Thank you so much for providing us with so much wisdom, hope, and joy on nature. It's so great you're saying that because we're going to be talking about awe and nature. Radical Remission book for a person mentioned with terminal cancer diagnosis. Yes, Helen, we have had Kelly Turner here. She's a dear friend. Time with Phoebe and Caroline. Thank you. The renewable prescription idea, accept and release, says Jody. Yes, it's great, isn't it? Thank you. Very inspiring and useful. Bliss bookends. Practice joy. Really, thanks. Great talk in the hour with specific tips. And speaking of which, just want to let everybody know our dear friend, Dr. Sherry Kelly, is going to be in the house with Abraham Gerard Meyer, and they are going to be talking. These two are incredible psychologists, and they are going to be talking about the work that they have been doing in the pandemic with Mental Wellness Society and also the books that have inspired them and their practice. So don't miss that. Their presentations are always fun and useful. And I really am looking forward to that. Phoebe, thank you again. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you,
Everyone.
everybody. Be well.